So did anybody hear if Peggy was going to make it? Should I wait a minute just to see if she links up?
Lori, you want to call her? She doesn't text, or I would text her. Lori's calling her.
Okay. I'll wait just a minute.
Yeah, I was gonna say you could probably start. And
She did, when I asked about people coming in, she did say she would be Zooming from home, so.
Okay. Okay, well, I'll just go ahead then and get started, and she can join us in a second. It's now 7:31, so I would like to call to order tonight's business meeting for.
Sorry,
Are we recording? Sorry.
It's not up in the
oh,
corner.
thank you, Dan. Yes, yes, yes. Now
That
we are.
makes us kind of live. There we go.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, here she comes, Ann.
Oh,
Who? Peggy's joining?
Yes, she's popping in right now.
Great. Okay.
There we go.
This time with feeling. I will start again. Okay, it is now. Hi, Peggy.
Hi, sorry for the delay.
Not a problem. Okay. Glad you could make it. It is 7:31, so I'd like to call to order tonight's business meeting for Tuesday, November 17th. Roll call, Ann.
Member Carter,
Here.
Member Demmett,
Here.
Member Patton,
Here.
Member Plosky, Paul.
Here.
Here we go. Okay, I heard that. Vice President Exum
I'm here.
and President Hall.
Here. All right. Sounds like all board members are present. So I now need to check and make sure. I don't think we have any additions, corrections, or modifications to tonight's agenda, do we?
Nope.
Okay, so none of those. Moving on to citizen statements. I don't believe we had any emailed to us or called in, and there's nobody present in the boardroom. So I'm going to assume that we have none for this evening. And then next up, 5.0 is call for executive session after tonight's meeting, which I believe we do not have. So we would need an approval, please, for tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Sorry, I muted myself. Hold on. Member Carter,
Yes.
Member Demmett,
Yes.
Member Patton,
Yes.
Member Plosky,
Yes, is there a problem with my mic?
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not hearing you. I am now. Okay,
I'll start screaming. Yes.
okay. We're wave or something. Member Fisher says yes, and Vice President Exum,
Yes.
President Hall.
Yes, agenda is approved. I do not believe we have any commendations or recognitions, do we, for tonight? So moving on to public hearing. Is that something we talk about now, or is this the tax thing comes later, correct? Right, okay.
Public hearing's not until December.
December, thank you. We're just gonna mention it. Okay. Communications, do we have any of those? No. All right. Moving straight into administrative reports then. I will let Jennifer take over to discuss 10.1, the school resource officer financial update.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen here. Can everybody see that? Okay. So as you know, during several meetings and discussions in recent weeks with the city, I've met several times with the mayor and with the chief and the business person there. We explored several less impactful options than what you see in front of you today. And during the time that we were meeting and discussing other ways to that the city might be able to partner with us to provide a little relief during remote learning, the city lost a police officer. So kind of unexpectedly, someone resigned. And then the city met with us, and they met with their patrol people and the lieutenants and had several discussions on their side, and came back, and Carol and I met with them again, and they've decided not to post this position. So they're going to absorb the costs or the cost savings through personnel attrition on their end. So that is how we're arriving to this financial cost change from our end. So I'm going to read this memo and then we can take questions at the end. Under Section 9, fee for services of the intergovernmental agreement with the City of Urbana, the agreement indicates that the school district will pay the city for the recurring costs for 2 officers, SROs, per the approved expenses outlined in the agreement. The city currently bills the district at the end of every fiscal quarter through July 1 and June 30th. In an effort to provide some financial relief to the district during this time of remote learning, the City of Urbana and the Urbana School District agree to modify the quarterly amount for salary and benefits costs billed by the city to the district. Following several discussions, both parties agree the city will charge/bill the district approximately $7,600 less a month than what they were legally entitled to charge per the agreement. This change in billing will become effective starting with Q2, which actually started in October. So we'll be kind of going back a little bit here retroactively for this current fiscal year. The city and the district will meet quarterly to review this billing modification. Should the district return to full in-person or hybrid instruction, which we're going to talk about here in a few minutes, the district will notify the city and the parties will meet to discuss the timeline for returning to school and any other modifications to the agreement required at the time. So we actually are going to plan to meet quarterly anyway. We have really good conversations, the mayor and the chief and I. And so we are going to just plan on a quarterly meeting regardless of whether we're remote or in person. Questions? Just stop sharing so I can see everybody's faces.
I just want to thank the administration for looking into this and bringing forward this solution.
Thank you, John. And I want to thank the city for, I mean, this was several meetings. I know how busy the mayor is. We're all really busy, and we all found the time to carve out to have several discussions about this. So this was something that is amenable to us. And I know the mayor and the chief will be having a similar conversation around the resolution that they passed at council a few weeks ago. So they will notify council. I did tell the mayor I really wanted us to have this conversation on our end first. And then they're going to have the same conversation in council at their next meeting. So this is more just information for you that we finally have come to a resolution, and I feel like this is a really good compromise for us.
So the reduction of 7,800, does it, could I ask how much that brings us down to per month, or do you have those numbers in front of you right now?
Yeah, it's about, right now they bill us about 81,000 a quarter. So that's about 27,250 a month.
Mm-hmm.
So now they're going to reduce that by 7,600. So that's about a 28% decrease.
And again, this is the salary and benefit portion of that. So it doesn't include the equipment. You know, those were costs that are just factored into the expenses monthly that we really can't do anything about those right now. But this accounts mostly for, well, it does account for salary and benefits.
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate it too. I know how much work you put into it, both last year and now, and in the willingness for everybody to work together it's really heartening to me. And I know that we all want the same thing. And at the end of the day, we're just going about it in different ways. So this is great news. And I hope that it's going to help us in the long run, like this year financially, but then we'll having more conversations when the contract comes to the end and reevaluate all of our systems. But hopefully we will all be out of this pandemic by that point, knock wood, and things will be different. So thank you to all of them who are watching, for all of you people in the city and the police department who helped work on this. I think it's a great compromise too.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate the thanks, Jennifer, for working, and the people at the city level for working on that. Before we completely leave the topic of SRO, so I would like to remind us of a discussion we had earlier in the fall when we were just discussing budget, and we kept our discussion about SROs in the budget early fall. But some of us acknowledged that because the landscape in the community and nation has changed since the board approved the SROs last year, in the fall of 2019, that some of us asked to revisit the increased presence of SROs in our middle and high school. And just as a reminder to listeners, in December of 2019, the board voted 4-2 with one member absent to increase the presence of our SROs in the district from a half to full-time. And so a couple of us asked if we could revisit the idea of the idea that we discussed last fall because of the changes that have occurred since our last discussion. And the changes I'm referring to, in my mind, that warrant a new discussion about the presence of SROs in the district are really twofold. One has to do with the changes in how we address racial equity. You know, as we all know, there were massive protests around the country and in our community over the past year around the treatment of Blacks by our criminal justice system. It certainly raised questions for me on whether our district policies and practices reflect our commitment to racial equity. So that's one reason to revisit. And the second reason for a renewed discussion about SROs, in my mind, has to do with the changes that have been brought by the pandemic itself, which has caused me, and I believe others on the board, to consider different budget priorities. So I'm formally asking if we can for us to revisit the question of SROs in our district early in 2021, ideally in January, before we start getting too caught up in other things.
Well, Peggy, I'd like to piggyback on that because honestly, I think that one of the parts of the discussion that would have to continue and earlier in 2021 would be a good time to do it is to figure out a system for how we're going to evaluate these programs because we didn't really have that in place when we first signed the contract. And I for one think that it would be great to have some sort of subcommittee or task force or something put together to see what it was that we set out to do by having this program, how we evaluate ourselves on our progress, and how it's fitting into all of the other support staff that we hired 2 years ago, or now it's going on 3 years ago, with the increased budgeting that we provided for support services. And I'd like to see how all those pieces fit together as a whole. I think that next year is a perfect time, you know, if not, I mean, maybe spring semester is too early, but at least to start working on it and discussing it in the summer, because that contract will be expiring sooner than we know it. And the pandemic, we don't know how it's going to wind down, but just to have an evaluation in place before we make any moves in the future, I think is the most prudent way to go for any big program that we implement in our district. And so I think that would be a good time to do it. And I hope that we can get voices from a lot of different places, not just from within our district, but people outside in the city who would also help us evaluate how this program works. But that's a discussion for another time, but I definitely would like us to put that on an agenda for many months down the road to look at it robustly.
So
I'd like to remind that the contract called for an evaluation process to occur in the late spring and towards the end of the calendar year. If we evaluate this too soon, we won't have the proper amount of history in order to properly evaluate it.
That's true, but what I think I said once in an earlier meeting was that it just seems like we kind of put the cart before the horse in some regards. And I mean, I'm not just targeting this one program. I think it's good that whenever you implement a new program, you already have ideas of how you're going to evaluate yourself with an end goal in mind before you sign any paperwork to that effect. And I mean, that could go as well with all of the support staff that we hired 2 or 3 years ago. What end goal did we have in mind? What concrete forms of concrete steps are we going to take to see that we're doing what we set out to do, and how can we justify it? How can we measure it? And I think that the SRO program is another one of those things that, you know, yes, we did say we were going to evaluate ourselves, but how? I mean, what does an evaluation look like, and who decides whether we've succeeded or failed? So I think that should be built into what we discuss.
I agree with what Dan's saying right here. I think that the I guess the reason I didn't support changing the budgetary numbers a number of weeks ago was the fact that, you know, even if we decided as a board we wanted to not have any SROs, you know, right then and there, we hadn't even started negotiations with the city on what the actual cost would be, because we're going to have to pay something for the equipment or whatever, right? So without the absence of a hard number of knowing what that would be, even if we made the decision, it was best to go with the previously budgeted number because we knew that it was going to be at least that much, which is, you know, why I voted the way I did. But I'm fully in favor of reevaluating the program, come the review process that we had previously planned on. But I also would like to incorporate some survey data, some broad survey data from parents and staff and community members prior to that point.
So I'm going to just kind of piggyback on what everybody has said, in that in December, I was going to bring this to you guys at our next study session. So it's good that we're talking about it now, not specifically around the scope of just the SRO, but we have a administrative meeting on Thursday. I'm going to be talking about this with the administrators. Is I am looking to, for the spring semester, is I want to really look at an equity task force. I know we've talked about the fact that this was going to be a beginning strategic planning year for us, and we're losing that basically due to COVID because we can't engage people in person. However, that doesn't negate the fact that we are going to have so many impacts, I guess, related to COVID. And the SRO, I think, is just one, because we haven't had a chance for that person to really get in and do the things that we said we wanted them to do, or him to do, or her to do, because we've been primarily remote. But there are a lot of other factors, I think, that we need to look at. Learning loss of students, social emotional, mental health needs. There are just so many things that I think are going to be coming out of this pandemic that we need a plan for. And so I was actually going to bring this in December, but we're talking about it now, so might as well. It came up that I'm going to kind of have this discussion with administrators first. I didn't want to, talk about it in public without talking to our principals, but so I'll just kind of get apologies from them on Thursday. But so since this came up today, but so yes, I would like to have 2-on-2 meetings with the board. Via Zoom, or however you guys will probably Zoom now, just to get your thoughts on some of those areas that you might think we could focus a task force around, and just some natural things that I'm already thinking are going to come out of that would be grading. It's just a lot of things, the impacts that we are feeling around limited assessments and how we're going to plan for that. Moving forward, financial, Carol and I have talked a lot about the financial implications of the pandemic. SROs, of course, would be a great place to kind of couch a conversation around evaluating the SRO related to that. So I'll bring that back to you guys at the December study session, which is what I was planning to do. And between now and then, I was going to kind of touch base with everybody about their thoughts on what an equity task force might look like. I know it's been a long time since we've done something like that. I was here in the days of the way back the equity steering committees and things like that. So I want to do it in a very thoughtful way, and I wanted to get board input on what that might look like. So be on the lookout for more discussion about that.
Well, that's good to know. And I just want to be clear on what my suggestion was. While I absolutely support the need for us to put more, give more discussion to how we want to evaluate, how we'll know whether the current SRO project is working. That's essential. But I'm also talking about the brief discussion we had when we were talking about the budget, about whether or not that there's reason to come back to our commitment to having 2 full-time SROs in our district or not, because of the changes that have happened this past year, namely the attention to racial equity, and whether or not our policies are upholding our commitment to racial equity in light of national attention. And then secondly, just our different budget priorities that have been forced because of the pandemic. So, I mean, I see them related, but they really are separate issues. I mean, one is a principal discussion about whether or not there's a place for SROs in our school district in light of our commitment to racial equity and in light of our budget constraints. So, that's the one that doesn't have to be tied to the evaluation, which I agree, John, you don't want to evaluate before you have anything to look at, but you need to know what you're measuring. And that can happen outside of the evaluation itself. So I guess my hope is that we could have the broader discussion earlier in the school year, in the new calendar year, January or February, as we get ready to think about evaluation of the current SRO agreement later on in the spring.
Any other comments before we move on? Well, thank you for everybody. And thank you again, Jennifer, and all of your team for sitting down and having these discussions. Okay, moving on to 10.2, in-person learning update.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen here a little bit. Everybody see that? Okay, so as I was going to share this with the board earlier, I've kind of gotten in a routine whenever I'm available. I watch the governor's daily press conferences because, again, my two favorite words, I said this in a meeting this morning, have been pivot and flexible. So we are pivoting once again. Our plan is to bring the hybrid learning plans from the elementary EC5, middle school and high school to you guys in December. The committees have been meeting again, and we've been talking more about how we can safely bring students back to the buildings. We started those conversations prior to this newest increase in spread in community spread in Champaign County. But we feel like we still need to have the conversations and have a plan and have something ready to go. Whether we're able to do that as soon as we like to or not, it remains to be seen, but we're still planning. So I wanted to kind of have an opportunity for the board to ask questions, not specifically about the plans, because we'll be bringing those to you at the December 1st meeting and the December 15th meeting. But just to get some early questions and early thoughts from you. I also wanted to share recent events and recent developments that I know hopefully you have been following. I know as board members you follow those, but also to enlighten our public and our community who might be watching, and some of our staff and families, just to remind them of where we are with these conversations. And just, if you don't read the News Gazette and you don't follow the news, this is a place for you to get some of that information. So today, our governor skipped stage tier 2 mitigations, and we went right from tier 1 to tier 3 based on the increase in numbers. I think as of today, Illinois has surpassed even Texas and California in the 7-day numbers related to COVID, which is really alarming. So today, the governor put the whole state, now not specific regions, but the whole state into tier 3 mitigations. We can talk about those in just a second. He very clearly said this is not a stay-at-home order, which is what we experienced in March, April, and May. These are very specific mitigations that he's stressing that we follow. The schools were not a big part of that discussion. It was more so, I have it linked here. So more so around retail, hotels. We've had a lot of conversations about restaurants and bars. So board members, this is linked in your document. If you're looking for a place where you can see what those mitigations are, you can follow this. But schools, surprisingly, were left out of these sections and these very specific categories, because the governor said that schools should follow the previously outlined precautions that we do follow from Illinois State Board of Education and Illinois Department of Public Health. And that decisions on whether to continue in-person learning are again going to be left up to local school districts. We've already made the decision to return to full remote learning following last Thursday. Julie Pride held a press conference from CU Public Health District, and at that time, she strongly recommended that all schools transition to remote learning. In an effort to help decrease the community spread, we closed our learning labs and our learning labs classrooms at all levels. It was really unfortunate. Our early childhood students had technically only been in for about 2 or 3 days because they started November 9th. And a lot of success was happening there. So this was a little disheartening for all of us. Some of those students who were attending those learning labs at the middle school, high school, basically all levels, we were seeing really positive progress and engagement. So it was disheartening that we had to stop that, but in the effort to join our community and flattening this curve, we did that. So Friday was the last day for in-person learning through winter break. Julie Pride also recommended all faith-based groups and churches should transition to remote activities only, no dining in restaurants. And this is one that the governor has spent a lot of time talking about the last few days, is limiting social events and gatherings. Based on the Illinois Department of Public Health data, gatherings and social events are really the big spreader right now. So on Friday, in response to that, if you saw any of the follow-up news related to that press conference, the regional and county group of superintendents met with Julie Pride and some of her staff regarding our thoughts around hybrid learning versus the schools remaining remote. So at that time, several of my colleagues, I really didn't have much to share from that conversation since we've been remote primarily, but a lot of our colleagues, as we've talked about here, have been in person since August. Some attending all day, 5 days a week, some on more of a hybrid schedule. So as a group, they really wanted to share with Julie and the public health district that schools have not been shown to be super spreaders, as we called, and most of the districts around us have not seen significant outbreaks. They at that time urged CU PhD to keep in mind that due to the safety protocols for masking and symptom screening and physical distancing, cleaning, and sanitizing, our schools are a safe place for students, maybe even more safe than hanging out with their friends, being in the community, some of the things that we know students will do if they're left up to their own devices and not coming to school. During that discussion, Julie did share with us that these were CU PhD's recommendations, and at this time they are not mandates. And there are several county districts that are planning to stay in person as long as they can do so safely. So once again, the spinning wheel of death from my computer, trying to catch up with me. So number 4 really speaks to the super spreader issue. So I know, again, we have not had large numbers of students. We had no more than maybe 50 attending at every site. But I did want to share some of our data related to positive cases and people in quarantine. If you've been following the data dashboard, now it's kind of doing its own thing. I'm going to stop sharing and see if that helps. Okay. If you've been following our data dashboard, you've seen the numbers. So hopefully you guys go there and check every now and then again. But we keep up with those on a spreadsheet. Our nurses have a COVID tracker sheet that they use for contact tracing. Angie is our contact tracing guru, and so she connects with all the administrators and staff and all of the principals and nurses related to contact tracing. So I'm going to let Angie talk a little bit about our current numbers, and in case the board has any questions about how we're tracking that data or how we're collecting it.
All right, I'll share my screen and I'll just briefly talk about it. So you can see what's going on. And I know that Dr. Ivory Tatum sent out a memo, and there was one thing that I forgot to include. So it changed some numbers briefly and I'll address that under something that you received this evening. So let's see if I can increase this for you. Is that big enough? Yep, okay. So on our data dashboard, something that's really important to us is the number of active cases that of COVID-19, of students who have COVID-19 due to school contact. So these are students that would be COVID-19 positive due to contacting the virus at school. And so this is 0, which is great. And so our safety protocols that are in place are working. You know, we haven't had a whole lot of students in the building since we've been remote, but we have had some instances where, you know, we've had some athletics practices early on, we've had some learning hubs, and 0 students have contracted the virus in our buildings due to any of our students already having the virus. So that's excellent. This is the number of active cases of staff contracting the virus due to other people in the building. So right now we have a confirmed 2. So 2 staff members got COVID-19 because of other cases in the building. There is a possibility of 1 more. It's a current case that we're still in contact tracing. It just came on my radar yesterday. And so we're still trying to figure out if it's traced back to the building or not. Okay, so this is 2. For number 3, these are the active cases of students, so COVID-19 students due to outside exposure. And so this number is it's really low for a number of reasons. So we're not going to always know if students are testing positive. So this is relying on parents to call us and tell us. It's relying on the health department to inform us. And so we're not going to always know this because a lot of students have not been in our buildings. And so it's not necessarily an immediate threat, but we might know because a parent has informed us, or a student has come to the building and we end up finding out that they're positive from something else, that they got the virus from outside. And so this is all outside exposures. For number 4, this is very interesting. So there are 23 staff members, and this is all broken up by department or by building, that have tested positive since July 1 for COVID-19. And this is a breakdown of the buildings. And so this is due to outside exposure. So out in the community, gatherings, grocery store, wherever, that the staff members have tested positive for COVID-19. So you'll notice that 23 outside exposure, and we have 2 staff members that have contracted it inside the building from other people. Number 5, number of students in quarantine due to school contact is 0. So none of our students have had to quarantine due to other people being COVID-19 positive. Number of staff members who've had to quarantine due to being around somebody at school that's COVID-19 positive, and that's 18. And let me kind of explain how this can blow up really quickly. So we had 1 staff member who tested positive for COVID-19 at Yankee Ridge. The staff member was exposed outside of school. The staff member came inside the school for e-learning to teach in the building, and had come in contact in 1 day with 5 people considered a close contact. So there's 5 right there. We had one of Randy's employees had been with facilities and maintenance. You're around a lot of people at the warehouse, a lot of people on the grounds. And so those numbers can skyrocket, and that's how the virus is spreading. And so 18 people quarantined due to contact at work is really a very low number in the grand scheme of things. Let's see, number 7, number of students in quarantine due to outside exposure, 20. Again, this is an extremely low number. We have no idea how many families have kept their kids in quarantine due to being exposed to other families. We just have no idea what that number could be. And the number of staff quarantine due to outside exposure, again, this is a number we would have no idea. And so different staff members have contacted us saying, you know, I was exposed at a funeral, or I was exposed at such and such. And so they might let us know, and that they have to quarantine, or the health department might let us know that somebody has to quarantine at an outside event. And so this number also isn't necessarily realistic. I would imagine it would be a lot larger, just based on how many staff members and students we have in the district. And so that kind of explains what we have going on. So it's pretty, I mean, I think that the protocols that we have in place, big shout out to Randy and his team. I'll get text messages on the weekend, and I'll text Randy, and he'll be in the schools. He'll go himself and be the custodial team there, and he will have the school cleaned by 6 o'clock in the morning on weekends or weekdays. And just that, you know, we're really taking it really seriously. We don't want our staff at risk. We don't want our students at risk. And so we don't want anybody to, you know, be hurt under our watch. And so if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Just to reiterate, Angie, you said that these are the numbers since July?
Since July
So-
1.
Wow. Okay. So that actually, if you think of it, if you just think of it in terms of like a month, it's not good. It's never good to have any, but it's low. But then since July, that's a long time. And that's a long time that we've been looking at this. And that really makes me feel good that we are doing everything we possibly can. I thank you, Randy, and everybody and all the teachers and everybody for staying as safe as they can. This is really, it's better numbers than I expected.
Yeah.
Angie, can you explain again how we know when a exposure happened within the school or outside the school? How you?
Sure. How we would describe that. So, for example, I'll go back. I'll share my screen again so that you'll kind of see the difference. Okay. So here. Number 2, active cases of staff due to school contact. So here, and I'm trying to be, you know, like keep everything like anonymous. So we had a staff member at one of our buildings, one of our schools, so here at Leo, that tested positive and that got the virus outside of school, and then came to work and transferred the virus to another staff member. And we're positive that that's how the transfer occurred. They were in close quarters, and then the person hadn't been around anybody else, and they worked pretty closely together. And that's how we are counting that as a close contact at school. And so same thing that happened down at facilities and maintenance. In one of our schools, one of our custodians, one of our employees got COVID-19, came to work, worked with, but that was an outside exposure, came to work before he knew that he had COVID, and then transferred it to another employee. And so that would be a 1 due to the fact that the second employee got it at school. For the ones outside the district, we have several. Funerals are a hot spot right now. Going to a visitation, a funeral, a wake, it's a super spreader event. We have several staff that end up having to quarantine. Weddings, funerals, and I know that these are big life events that people have planned. Other things, I'm trying to think of other things that we've gotten word back. I mean, there are still people that are socializing and out and about, you know, and so, and there are people that, you know, they don't know how they got it. So it's just that if they were exposed outside and then they tell us, hey, you know, I got this out, you know, at such and such house, if they can't say that they got it at work, then they got it somewhere else.
And all the numbers that you're reporting on refer to students and staff, whether they're in our buildings or 100% remote. Is
Yeah, that we know of, Peggy.
Yeah,
So
we
like,
know.
for example, like for the students, the staff have been told that they have to contact their supervisor and human resources if they test positive. We had an instance where a staff member did not tell us that, and that it just causes a lot of problems because we do extra cleaning when we find that out. You know, especially if they've been in the building, because public health does contact us. However, there's a delay, but for students, public health is just, they're really busy. And so for here, for like number 7, the number of students in quarantine due to outside exposure is 20. I mean, I would think that there's more than 20 students in our school district that have quarantined at some point because they've been around somebody that has been COVID positive, but it's really hard for me to know that number. And so like to be completely confident. So how we're basing this is so for example, at you'll see a lot of elementary schools. So Thomas Paine, Yankee Ridge, and Wiley, we've had students come to school with temperatures or sneezing and coughing and having a lot of symptoms. And when that happens, the school nurse, we send them home and we won't let them return to the learning lab for the 2 weeks because they've had so many symptoms. So that would be a quarantine, or the health department has notified us that they have a staff member that's tested positive, and then that would quarantine them as well. And so for the students that have tested positive that we know about in the district, whether or not it's outside of school, like we have 10, I would assume that that number would be higher. We just don't know. But maybe not. I mean, that would be fantastic. I just think the numbers are spiking in our area. I would presume that that would be higher. So.
Well, good. Thank you. And then just one final question. If you know, a student like you just described comes to school and has lots of symptoms that suggests it could be COVID, and that student is sent home and quarantined, do we know that that student is able to get tested to ensure whether or not it is indeed COVID or not? Are we able to follow up on that or provide testing?
We have several spreadsheets and several documents given to us from our attorneys that have been provided, you know, for all their clients. And so on this, I'm looking at the spreadsheet right now. I can't share it with you because it has a lot of that, you know, just a lot of private information. But we track the student's name, we track the siblings and the family, the parent's name, the phone number, symptoms, the testing date, whether or not there's a doctor's note, bus number, when they can return to school, a parent's note with them, a possible exposure location. And then there's like a notes section. And so in that note section, like even in symptoms like temperature 101.3, achy, runny nose. And so you can write down called mom, suggested testing. We can't mandate that anybody, like I can't require that staff members get tested. And I've had staff members say that they don't want to be tested. And so we can't require it. We can refuse them to come into the building and for 14 days. And we can do that for students. But of course we're recommending it. And so on the papers that go home with the kids, it has lots of information for the parents on how they can access the testing. And I know that Dr. Avery Tatum has met frequently with different people in the community. She can speak to that and trying to provide more access for testing to our staff and students.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions about contact tracing or how we're doing that?
Angie, for the employees that end up having to quarantine or isolate, they are able to take advantage of the Families First. Is that correct?
Yes. And so there's a couple of different things. So they get the 10 COVID days if they are unable to work, if they're unable to telework. They get 10 COVID days, so they don't have to use their own benefit time. If they are able to telework, so for people that have to quarantine that are asymptomatic and they want to continue working, you know, we've had that happen with people on this Zoom. And so they've had to quarantine and they want to work, they want to telework. and they've been able to be at home and teleworking, and they have not had to use those COVID-19 days. And so obviously that's best case scenario for the district because we get more work productivity. However, you know, we are very compassionate and we want people to be well. And so it's a nice extension, you know, like it's nice that the government has offered that for employees because nobody would have ever anticipated that. And so we have several people that have been able to use that.
Thanks. I just wanted others to hear that that was,
Yeah.
a lot of people don't know about that. I know because
Yeah.
I'm in HR, but just so those listening understand that, you know, if a person is positive or, you know, being required to quarantine, and there are some other things there too that are available, that they don't have to use their personal sick leave benefits, but have those available.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Corey. And so since you and I live this world, like I kind of forget that people don't realize it. And this is good for our listeners because we send out email after email to our staff, making sure that they know what's available to them. And some employers don't do that. And you are entitled, every person is entitled to 10 80 hours if you work full time or close to full time. You get 10 COVID-19 sick days. And so if somebody has to quarantine for 14 days, those 10 days, the Monday through Friday, you can have that benefit time. So you don't have to use personal days, sick days, vacation days. So you won't be docked pay or use your own benefit time. So yes, thanks Tori for chiming in because that does sound really awful if you don't know that.
Well, and we have an part of our agreement, our MOU with the union is that, and you know, when we have situations where we might have a person who uses up all their COVID leave, that we'll look at those cases individually, you know, and we don't have like a set standard that we're applying to everybody. We want to be compassionate and look at those one-on-one as they come up.
Does that, do those 10 days count towards a staff member's family as well? Let's say one of the teachers has a child who's homesick with COVID and they need to look after that child, that will also apply?
Yes.
It's good to know.
Yep.
Okay.
Good questions.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else? Okay, I'm going to go just a little more information. I'm wanting you guys to be prepared for our discussions to come in December. So this is kind of laying the groundwork for that. So again, I know we're all experiencing anxiety around the fact that these numbers are ridiculous right now and that the community spread is a real thing. However, that doesn't negate the fact or excuse the fact that our students still need some in-person instruction. And we're going to do our very, very best to get them back into the buildings safely and follow our protocols to make that happen. So we're continuing the work around planning to hopefully have that happen in January. Again, none of us are unrealistic to the fact that that might not be the case, but we're still trudging ahead with the hope, and I'm going to say with the hope and prayer, because that's what I do, that we will get kids back face-to-face with teachers. So one of the things that we're evaluating is, you know, we have concerns. Oh, I should be sharing my screen. Sorry. I'm looking at my screen. You guys can see what I'm looking at. So we do have concerns that we have students out there who are not engaging and are not making progress. One thing that we've talked about is how can we increase instructional minutes? How can we provide more face-to-face time with our students and our staff, and just the instructional supports for students? So part of our conversations is if the county numbers allow us to be in buildings safely, we would like to start staggering and kind of rolling students back into in-person learning situations and at all levels. EC12 following the Martin Luther King holiday weekend. We completely understand that the time between Thanksgiving and winter break is going to be really tricky, especially if people don't adhere to the guidance and limit themselves around the Thanksgiving gathering times. But we also know that with winter holidays and New Year's Eve and all of those other events happening, While we're on winter break, we don't expect that we would want to invite everybody back into our buildings on the first day back, which is January 4th. So we're anticipating that students and staff will remain remote, coming back off of that long winter break, that 2-week break. So hopefully by Martin Luther King weekend, we would be able to start transitioning staff back into the buildings and then students back into the buildings. We're not looking at going into our full hybrid. We talked about our full hybrid a lot back in August and July. So right now we're looking at more of a transitional hybrid where we won't be bringing, at the high school, we have, 1,100-ish kids. We won't be bringing 500 kids on 2 days a week and 500 the other 2 days a week. We'll have a more thoughtful plan around how we'll invite students back. So at early childhood and King, families will be contacted regarding their intent to return in person or remote. Again, I can't say this enough that in every situation, we will always have a remote only option. I just want to make sure people continue to hear that. At UECS, an AM PM session will be offered for small groups of students. At King, part of their hybrid they were just doing was they were mirroring the elementary synchronous learning sessions. So in January and February, hopefully, if not January, February, King, those two classes will offer a morning session from 8:30 to 11. At the elementary level, families again will be asked to indicate their preference to return in person or remote. And depending on the numbers, we are hoping to invite students back to classrooms and keeping those groups a little bit smaller than what we'd originally talked about. We set the classrooms up for 12 to 15. Now that we had some students back, socially distanced and physically distanced, 6 feet apart with desks, through our pilot, we realized that a better number is more closer to 10. And maybe 12, depending on the size of the classrooms. So that's the plan for elementary. Middle school and high school, students will be invited back based on their engagement levels during the first semester. Grades, we're looking really closely at grades. Not that grades are everything, but grades are really important to our 8th graders and our seniors transitioning to the next grades. Attendance. We've shared some chronic truant and chronic absenteeism data with you, as well as, again, we want to be able to offer those spaces to our students that might have special needs or who need additional language supports. We'll be sharing more detail around these plans in December, and my plan is to break the levels up, so we won't try to give you everything at once. So we'll bring you the EC5 plans, and then we'll talk secondary, so we can have kind of level specific conversations about what this might look like in the second semester. And we are continuing to have ongoing collaborative conversations with UEA around staff expectations and how we can, as a collaborative group, administration and UEA leadership work together to hopefully make this a seamless transition for everybody. So I know we didn't give you a lot of really specific details tonight, but that wasn't the intent. Tonight was just to kind of preview what we're going to talk about in the weeks to come in our next 2 meetings, when you get to hear a little bit more about the plans for return to in-person learning. So questions? I know we spent a little more time talking about COVID things than I planned to initially. But with the press conference on Thursday, with, the governor's announcements, with our, 86,000 active cases in the state of Illinois, bumping us to #1 today in the last 7 days, it was kind of prudent for us to just kind of have that conversation and allow you some time to ask us questions about how we're planning to keep everybody safe. I know we talked about these things way back in August, but now that we've had students in the building, we've tweaked our procedures a little bit. We've tweaked our protocols a little bit. We've learned some new things. We'll go back to that phase 4 plan once once we finalize what everybody's doing at all of their levels. And we'll go back and revisit those protocols that we put in place way back in August.
Thanks, Jennifer. The information has been very helpful. Will families be asked to give their intention about staying remote or coming in person in December, or will that be after the new year when you'll ask for that feedback?
So the only level that we're going to do that is elementary, because we have space constraints. You know, we're really wanting to limit the number of students that we have in a classroom. Early childhood is not going to survey families. They're going to be, you know, have more conversations and contact families directly. But the elementary will start off as a survey, and if people we don't hear from, we'll probably be making phone calls as well. But we will do that in December, hopefully. So that will give the principals time in between, you know, over that winter break, coming back from January, time to make sure that we have the supports that we need in the classrooms. We haven't decided on the final model. We have another meeting tomorrow. I'm meeting again with the elementary remote learning planning team. So once we don't want to survey families until we can survey them on exactly what we know what we want to ask them. We want to be able to say, this is exactly what it's going to look like, so people know what they're signing up for. Does that make sense? So we want them to know this is what's happening from 8 o'clock until however long the students are going to be there in person, so I can make an informed decision when I complete that survey if I'm deciding I want to come in person or I want to stay remote. So we don't want to survey them prematurely until we have a very solid plan.
Thank you.
At the middle school and high school, we are going to do more of a invitation based on these specific things, based on attendance, based on grades, based on engagement. We know there are also some parents who have been very actively reaching out to the administrators that want their kids in person, who need specific supports. And so we'll make sure that those would be the families that we reach out to. Our goal is to try to keep, you know, not to go to a full 400 or 500 kids, but to kind of keep us around that 250 to 300 students if we can at the secondary level.
Great. Thank you.
Jennifer. Oh, sorry. There's another opportunity, or will there be another opportunity for those families that maybe didn't fill out the remote form for their child to have another opportunity to say, hey, I want my child to go remote? And if so, is that something that would also be coming out in December? Or
yeah.
what? Okay.
Yep, absolutely. So we'll open that back up. We feel like at this point there might be some families, and I don't know, we would have to wait and see with the cases the way they are, but in January there might be families who decide they have really been struggling with remote learning and want their students and they want to change their minds. You know, they may have filled out the form prior to all of this and now have decided they want to give in-person learning a chance, so that we'll have it go both ways. You know, people can still select or elect to do that, and people who did elect to do it can change their minds at this point. So
okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Jennifer, would we have enough teachers who would come back? I know it would be a smaller number, but still, I also know that there is a shortage and a lot of teachers could have other issues going on why they would not be comfortable coming back.
Sure. So part of the plans that will impact elementary more than anybody, because, you know, elementary will have everybody in their classes when we do go to this model. So right now, one of the models that we're looking at with the elementary staff would allow the teachers who have already been approved for any medical reason, or they have a family member that's been approved and they can't come back. So we have a model that allows them to continue to be remote, but students can still be in the classroom. So you're in Champaign, I know. So there's a way that the teacher can still be in the Zoom and somebody else is in the classroom with the students. So we're going to work hand in hand. Kim and I will work with the principals. You know, we may have to use some substitutes to be those in-person people. ISB did give us an allowance where we can use TAs and support staff to help in those ways. We'll have to, very thoughtfully think of anybody in the building who might be able to be part of an in-person setting for a teacher who has to stay has a medical exemption and needs to stay remote.
Another question I had is, would you be offering specials such as art and music, PE, for those students when they do come back? And what would that look like exactly? Would that be a remote setting, or would they actually, the teachers actually come into several of the classrooms? How would that look?
So really good question. So yeah, whatever we do, our plan at elementary has always been that the fine arts, those people would not travel.
Right.
Because we don't want cross-contamination among classrooms. So whether we go back to this as a transitional model, or even when we go back to our full hybrid at elementary, that'll be something that we'll look at. The plan right now, the students Zoom in. Even I was in a classroom at Dr. Williams with a teacher who was teaching her. She had some in-person students and students in her Zoom, and it was very seamless. They are on their computers. They had drama. They go, a drama teacher comes right into the Zoom, and they have that at that fine arts. So PE is handled very much the same way, library. So we'll continue that, where we won't have those people traveling from room to room. Those would be provided via Zoom. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Other questions? So one thing I did forget to add way back at the top of when we were talking about the tier 3 mitigations, I didn't know if this would come up, but I wanted to just share that, I know we're still meeting remotely. We have kind of had some opportunities where some of us have been in person, but the governor's tier 3 mitigations, I shared an email with you guys right before the meeting from our attorneys. That the board meetings are not subject to, where board meetings are exempt from the 10-person to 25-person rule within the mitigations. However, we're still encouraged to stay remote when we can. We're encouraged to follow those guidelines, and we are still under a disaster proclamation. The most recent disaster proclamation was renewed for 30 days on November 13th. So what we're doing is still well within the law, scope of the law, but that will continue. And so I just wanted to mention that out loud in case people had questions too. And I wanted to say that for the public, so. Any other, so we'll bring more information. Kim and I are meeting constantly with the principals and the whole team. We meet UEA. We have another meeting tomorrow. So we're trying to have as many upfront conversations as we can. And like we have done in the past, if we have to pivot, we pivot, but at least we'll be prepared and always have a plan, so. All right.
Thank you for that. And thank you for keeping us all updated with this moving train. It seems like every day it's going into a different stop. Okay, moving on to 10.3, the 2020 proposed tax levy. So I will let you take us away there, Carol.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Tonight, later on the agenda, I'm going to be requesting the board approve the proposed 2020 tax levy. The amount is $46,170,000. The reason we do this in November is in order to give me direction so I can publish the proposed tax levy in the News Gazette, advertise our public hearing that's going to happen in December on the 15th. And so if anybody wants to, they can come to the board meeting on that night and discuss that with the board. But in order for us to comply with the truth in taxation, it's required that we publish. Because we're going over the 105% of our levy from last year. And you'll recall that the reason we do this is because our CPI this year is only 2.3%. So really taxes are only going to be able to receive 2.3% more than what we got last year. We also can take advantage of any new construction under tax caps. Normally, our new construction would be about $13 million this year, but again, because of the possibility of the hospital court decision, the hospital exemption would provide another large unknown if that would happen to come back on as taxable property. Although it's not likely that that's going to happen, we want to make sure that if it were to happen, that we were prepared for that and wouldn't lose out. So this has a possibility, the hospitals of adding about 114 million in additional new construction that we would want to take advantage of. It's nothing that commits us to doing anything at this time, but if we don't levy for it and it happens, we would miss that opportunity. Once that's in your base, it's built on from there on, because every future levy is built off of the previous levy. So it would at least give the board the opportunity to have some time to think about it. If it does come on, we wouldn't have to increase by that amount, and we would have the ability until February of next year to reduce our tax rate if we wanted to. This is all in case the hospitals come back on. If they don't, this will do nothing. The bottom line is even though I'm requesting about a 25% increase, which is in line with what we've done over the past couple of years, I will share with you what I provided in the board packet, which basically shows pretty long history of our tax levies every year. And you can see even in the years where, since about 2016 is where we started increasing and doing the balloon levies, where you can see we went from doing a 5% levy to about 28, 29, and then this year we're doing 25%. Or last year we did 25, and then this year again we're doing 25. So, but you can see even in these years where we're levying at 20 to possibly 30%, if you look over here in the actual increase column, we only are getting 3.4, 4.7. We're not getting near that amount. So I want it to be clear to people, and if you talk to constituents in the community, even though we are advertising for a 25% increase, the only reason we're doing that is to act as a safety net. It doesn't lock us into anything. It just basically provides a ceiling so that if the hospitals come back on, we will have the opportunity to talk about this and see what we want to do. And nothing locks us into having a 25 to 30% increase. So does not increase our tax rate doing this balloon levy. So just make sure everybody understands that. And if the hospitals would come back on and lose their exemption, we would have until February 28th of 2021 to evaluate this and see what we want to do and consider abating or lowering our debt service tax rate if we wanted to do that. So is there any questions on that? It will be on the agenda later. A lot of information was included in the memo that I sent out to the board. But it's about a 46 million, like I said, levy, 25% increase, and I will go ahead. If the board approves this later on in the agenda, I will go ahead and move forward with the required publications and make sure we're in line with the law for the tax levy and file it by the 4th Tuesday in December. If the board approves it back in December. This is just the first step. Any questions?
Yeah. So Carol, usually at this point in time, you have a kind of an estimate of what the new construction would be. You mentioned 13 million, but is that that wasn't in the, if it was in the memos, I didn't see it. I apologize for that, but is that kind of the forecasted amount for this time around?
12,670,000 is what was in the assessor's letter to me. That was their estimate, was about 12.6 million.
Say the number again. 12 million?
12.6 million.
12.6. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, well, if you think of anything really quickly between now and when we get to the vote, feel free to ask. Okay, right, moving on to 11.0, we are on to our action items for tonight. This is the consent portion of the action items. First up is 11.1, the minutes for the October 20th, 2020 business meeting and the November 10th, 2020 special meeting. And I'm grouping these all together. We'll take a roll call vote at the end. So 11.2, bills and checks. The education fund bills are in the amount of $794,000. Operations and maintenance fund bills in the amount of $174,000. Bond and interest fund bills, $530. Transportation fund bills in the amount of $22,000. Working cash bonds, $293,000. Tort in the amount of $82,000. Payroll in the amount of $4.2 million. The Urbana adult education budget for September through November is $192,000. And that's all of our bills and checks. Then we also have 11.3 personnel items. We'll need approval for various standard personnel items to be requested. 11.4, resolution authorizing and directing the sale or disposal of personal property, which is the library weeding logs for both UHS and Wiley schools. And then finally, 11.5, the Press Plus issue 105, which I believe was the Title IX stuff. Is that, or am I confounding the two? That's the approval to adopt that. And before we take a vote, or we'll put a motion on the floor, but if anybody has any questions about that last issue, we can take a question about it. Do I have a motion to accept 11.0's agenda items tonight?
Well, assuming that no
So-
one wants to take anything off that agenda,
Thank
would-
you, John.
I would move approval of the consent agenda.
Does
Second.
anybody, oh, sorry, Peggy seconded it, so nobody wants to take anything off. Okay. Okay, motion and second. Do we have any questions at all relating to any of the points before we take a final vote, including Title IX stuff? Okay, okay, roll call, please, Ruth Ann.
Member Carter,
Yes.
Member Demmett,
Yes,
Member Patton,
Yes.
Member Pulaski,
Yes.
Member Fisher votes yes, Vice President Exum,
Yes.
and President Hall.
Yes, motion passes. And now on to 12.0, individual action items. 12.1, we have a number of gifts, which we received. The first from Angela and Scott Carr of Muhammad donated $500 to the Urbana High School boys basketball activity account. From Family Service RSVP, which is Retired and Senior Volunteer Program, we got a donation of a box of handmade masks to be distributed to our district buildings for students' use. To Urbana High School boys basketball program, we received an anonymous donation of athletic apparel for all levels valued at $31,525. Wow. And from the estate of Joan Barr in Minnesota, we got a donation of $1,406 or $407, excuse me, to the Urbana Adult Education Center. So first we'll take a roll call on that one, and then we'll do a roll call separately for the tax levy. I believe that's okay.
need a motion first. I move we approve,
Motion first, please.
accept the gifts and send thank you notes.
Thank you, John. Do we have a
Second.
motion? Okay. Roll call, please.
Member Carter,
Yes.
Member Demmett,
Yes,
Member Patton,
Yes.
Member Pulaski,
Yes.
Member Fisher votes yes, Vice President Exum,
Yes.
and President Hall.
Yes, motion passes and thank yous will be sent out. Now back to 12.2, the 2020 proposed tax levy, which Carol just discussed. If anybody does not propose any changes, do I have a motion to vote on this?
I move we approve the administrative recommendation.
Second,
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last questions at all? Okay, seeing none, we'll take a roll call, please.
Member Carter,
Yes.
Member Demmett,
Yes,
Member Patton,
Yes.
Member Pulaski,
Yes.
Member Fisher votes yes, Vice President Hall, I'm sorry, Vice President Exum,
Yes.
and President Hall.
Yes, motion passes. Okay, do we have on 13.0, do we have a call for any future special or executive meetings?
Tonight.
Not tonight. All right, great. 14.0 is our superintendent's report. I'll let you take it.
Okay. Get in there. It's a short one tonight. So upcoming is, and if you guys know what this means, we'll have to all help each other. Muthbosh. I did a video for this, so I'm looking forward to finding out what it means. So it is time for the show to go on, and tickets are available. In the superintendent report that went out on Friday, there was a link. We've shared the link. I've sent the link to board members as well. So tickets can be purchased via that link. And it is going to be a virtual show. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that is going to look like. So that is November 20th, 21st at 7 p.m. So get your tickets, share the link. I know the students would love to see a huge virtual crowd. So we're really looking forward to that. That'll be a first. Thursday is Family Reading Night. Family Reading Night is a staple in our district. I mean, we've been doing it for many, many years. And it is always the Thursday before Thanksgiving. So this week, it is this Thursday, November 19th. Many of our schools have activities planned, all virtual, of course, where students and families can get into the Zooms together and read books, and there are other really exciting things that people have very creatively planned out since we can't do this event in person. So if you go through the update again, there is a link to a document, and you can visit your school families. You can go in and find out what's happening at your building specifically, and anybody who's just interested in joining, the links are available to all. Also on Friday, we shared a music spotlight for UMS. I know we tend to focus a lot on the high school, but this was a great celebration for 11 UMS students who are going to be competing in the ILMEA, All District Festival. Typically, this is something that our students do in person, and it is always a well-attended night. Both of my boys participated when they were at the middle school and high school. So Grace Cody, Lana Cooper, Gabe Dussard, Isaiah Menard, Theo Nevins, Caroline Paluska, Cavender Patel, Michael Turner, Samantha Walden, Matthew Story, and Karen Sanchez. Congratulations and good luck, and thank you for representing the district with your talents. So this is also Transgender Awareness Week. So Transgender Awareness Week is a week where transgender people and their allies take action to bring attention to the community by educating the public about who transgender people are, sharing stories, experiences, and advancing advocacy. So November 20th is Transgender Day of Remembrance Day. Just wanted to mention that. And we have one more student celebration. Asia Johnson placed third. Asia is the co-captain from the Winter Guard. And as you know, if you follow the UHS Color Guard and Winter Guard, they typically perform as a group and have earned several recognitions. But Asia here received an individual recognition by placing third at the virtual IDTA Start the Beat competition on November 7th. So congratulations to Asia. And last but not least, we wanted to remind families that in observance of Thanksgiving, there's no school next Wednesday and of course Thursday, but also Friday. So next week, remote learning activities will only be shared with families on Monday and Tuesday. And we want people to really unplug, enjoy your time together. Again, wear your mask, wash your hands, watch your distance, avoid gatherings. I know I'm sounding like Dr. Ezike from Illinois Department of Public Health, but we can't say it enough as we remind people to help our community move in a better direction, if not for your family, for our students, so we can get them back in school. So that is the end of that. FOIAs, we have a couple. These have all been fulfilled. Jen Last from WCIA. All documented electronic and written communication relating to the use of unlicensed personnel for in-person learning in the fall 2020 semester and ISBE's emergency ruling. This request includes and is not limited to emails, letters, memos, proposals, and text messages. This request covers a time period from October 5th, 2020 to October 10th, 2020. Vince Espy or Epsy from Local Labs. Any contracts involving guest speakers for the 2019 and 2020 school year. Please include virtual speakers as well. Lastly, Brian Dolinar. Any email exchange between Jennifer Ivory Tatum and staff regarding SROs or the SRO contract. I would like to ask for any emails with the keywords Smile Politely, Amina Payne, Allison O'Dwyer, or Brian Dolinar from the time period between August 1st through September 30th, 2020. And those have all been fulfilled.
Thank you. Okay, 15.0 is board reports. Do we have any board reports tonight?
I was just going to say everything at the delegate assembly went well. There was no hiccups or anything. So I'm looking forward to Saturday for the virtual conference to learn some other new things, and hopefully that'll be a good one.
Is it Saturday or Friday?
I think it's Friday, isn't it?
It's Friday. I'm off. I'm sorry. I've been Zooming every night and it's only Tuesday. I apologize.
Oh, I had it on the wrong date of my calendar. Very good.
It's Friday. You're right.
Did you, Brenda, did you notice if the turnout was, I mean, I guess you can't really see all the people who turn out virtually, but did it seem like there was a large turnout for the delegate assembly?
Yes, they had, in the beginning, it was kind of slow for people logging in. We started out with 240, but ended up with 289 delegates total. So I thought that was pretty good for being virtual.
Yeah.
And the program that they had was very simple way to vote, and they could tell everyone was registered, the delegates, and when we logged in, there was a very easy thing to be able to vote, and they knew we were all logged in from each district. So,
wow. Thanks. Any other board members with reports? Okay, well, I don't know how many of you guys are registered for Friday's conference. I'm going to be attending it, but it does feel weird not to be going up to Chicago this weekend. I know it's probably going to be cold up there anyway, but still, I just had to look really quickly today at the some of the selections that we could choose from, and just curious how it's all going to play, because when we go in person, we can sneak in and sneak out sometimes with different things if we want to try and make more than one at one time, if we want to split our time up because there's too many things to look at, but I don't know how that's going to work on Friday. So anyway, okay, well, I think with no other reports, then I guess we need a motion to adjourn tonight.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Member Carter,
yes.
Member Demick,
Yes.
Member Patton,
Yes.
Member Plasky,
Yes.
Member Fisher votes yes, Vice President Exum,
Yes.
and President Hall.
Yes, meeting is adjourned.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Ann. Thank you,
Good night,
Jennifer.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Happy
you too.
Thanksgiving.
Oh,
Stay
yes.
healthy.
Bye, Lori.
Bye-bye.